Did you know that 1 in 3 Americans feel like they have to self-censor their political beliefs? This alarming self-censorship is just one of the many ways ideological extremism has infiltrated our lives. And it goes against everything we're supposed to believe in as Americans. It reminds me of a quote from Thomas Jefferson: "I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." These words resonate with the enduring battle of ideological extremism we face today, a battle against the insidious tyranny that takes root within our minds. How does ideological extremism take root in societies, spreading from fringe belief to cultural norm? I've spent the past year researching this phenomenon in depth through historical accounts, psychological analyses, and interviews with those who escaped its grasp. What I uncovered reveals chilling vulnerabilities in our own minds that we must address, or risk history's dark chapters repeating. Extremism often spreads through subtle and underhanded means, eroding freedoms and reason before we realize what's happening. It manifests as a silent tyranny over the mind. But by illuminating its shadowy tactics, we gain the power to stop its spread. It begins innocently enough, as we assert our right to hold our own beliefs. But many times, the reality is far more sinister. When parents indoctrinate their children with irrational dogmas, when young hearts and minds fall prey to the lure of radical ideologies, when individuals become convinced that violence and oppression will pave their path to salvation. This is the true face of tyranny, and the fight against destructive belief systems lies at the very core of human endeavor. Yet indifference prevails among many of us. We take for granted the sacrifices of past generations. We turn a blind eye to the untold suffering still endured by countless people around the world. Sheltered by the comforts in our developed nations, we remain apathetic to the rise of extremist ideologies elsewhere. Some may argue that everyone is entitled to their own beliefs and opinions, but does this indifference and moral detachment exempt us from the responsibility to curb forces that have historically resulted in tremendous bloodshed and conflict? In the profound words of Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel, "The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. The opposite of beauty is not ugliness, it's indifference. The opposite of faith is not heresy, it's indifference. And the opposite of life is not death, but indifference between life and death." Indifference favors the oppressor over the oppressed. It deepens suffering when the cries of victims go unheard. As citizens and creators living in an interconnected global community, we cannot remain complicit behind the shield of profit incentives and notions of unchecked personal liberty. The technologies we build, the corporations we grow, the policies we endorse, they shape the fabric of society in ways far more profound than we realize. We have a moral imperative to vigilantly guard our collective mindscape against the infiltration of belief systems that foment hatred, spur ethnic violence, and threaten the ideals of equality we hold dear. But this raises another question. What role do we play as citizens? What responsibility do we have over the forces that shape society? Our technologies, corporations, and governments carry profound power. How do we keep them in check? How do we combat the spread of extremism that threatens our people? I don't claim to have all the answers, but I believe the first step is to wake up, to become aware of the forces vying for control of our minds. Awareness alone can begin to shift the tide, but to get there, we must first explore how this self-perpetuating cycle works. I want to start by going way back in history. Imagine you were born into a nation like North Korea. From childhood, you face relentless indoctrination about the supreme leadership's infallibility. You hear constant propaganda about the enemy West through media and at school. Deviating from the prescribed beliefs risks harsh punishment. In this environment, you'd likely internalize the propaganda uncritically. You start policing your own thoughts, fearful of expressing doubt. Over decades, the party's ideology would shape your entire worldview. You wouldn't just parrot the beliefs, you would embody them. I did not have to imagine this. I lived this. As a 7-year-old in Iran, I burned the American flag, chanted death to Israel, hated Jews, and wanted nothing more than to become a martyr for Islam. All of this is so personal for me. If it wasn't for my family's decision to immigrate to the US, who knows where I would be today. This is the insidious danger of unchecked indoctrination, especially for children. It overrides critical thinking and compassion. Followers don't just obey authoritarian regimes, they come to revere them. They internalize the ideologies so deeply that facts cease to matter. This is how tyranny sustains itself. But children indoctrinated today become educators and leaders for the next generation. This means they pass down warped ideologies and keep the cycle of oppression turning. This self-perpetuation consolidates the regime's power further by monopolizing thought itself. Russia's invasion of Ukraine provides a modern example. Many Russians continue supporting Putin's propaganda, even in the face of horrific atrocities. Why? Because decades of systemic indoctrination conditioned millions to venerate Putin's authoritarianism and view the West as an enemy. This cycle continues today through state control of media and education. Ending the cycle requires opening minds early to counter perspectives and critical thinking before toxic beliefs become ossified. It requires promoting institutional diversity and intellectual freedom. Only then can humanity foster citizens capable of breaking free from the shackles of indoctrination. It's easy to believe progress is impossible when flawed ideas seem so deeply entrenched. But humanity's moral evolution reveals that beliefs can and do change dramatically. 500 years ago, imperialism and slavery were globally accepted. Today, much of the modern world condemns these practices. Until the 20th century, absolute monarchies ruled most nations. Now, democracy predominates. For millennia, male domination was the norm. Now, notions of gender equality have gained traction. At each juncture, visionaries dared to challenge existing paradigms by introducing bold new ideas. Long accepted dogmas about social hierarchies faced unrelenting scrutiny. Moral arguments took root calling for universal human rights. But progress was neither linear nor smooth. Support for slavery and racism persisted for centuries despite rising opposition. Universal suffrage in the US only arrived in 1965 after prolonged struggles. Regressive ideas flourish today, emboldened by digital echo chambers. Yet, we cannot deny the overall trajectory of moral enlightenment. Modern societies largely embrace ideals like individual liberty, educational access, and diversity that even 100 years ago remained fringe concepts. This underscores that beliefs are not static. No matter how deeply ingrained, they can undergo dramatic transformations when new ideas gain cultural prominence through education and media. History teaches us that by raising our collective moral consciousness, harmful notions that were once ubiquitous can become universally condemned within generations. My own life reflects this potential for change. I held many misguided beliefs in my youth, but new information and experiences led me to more enlightened thinking. Like a winding river, our minds adapt based on the terrain they traverse. Transformation doesn't magically happen on its own. This brings us to a pivotal question. What kind of environment fosters an open and evolving mind? I think we all know intuitively that the ideas and information we're exposed to matter hugely. That's why parents care deeply about who educates their kids. They want an environment that sets them up for success. Yet when it comes to the information ecosystems we inhabit as adults, we seem much more passive. We accept social media algorithms feeding us content based on engagement, not quality. We leave talk show hosts and politicians to shape public discourse as they chase ratings and power. The lesson is clear. Whoever controls ideas and information wields immense authority over what a society views as normal, moral, and even possible. The powerful keep citizens obedient by monopolizing thought itself. Only by upholding diversity of ideas, voices, and cultures can we safeguard intellectual freedom and moral progress. Let's now examine some more recent case studies to see these dynamics at play. I want to look specifically at the immense power wielded by tech platforms like Twitter and Facebook to shape public thinking. Consider the unprecedented decision by Twitter to ban President Trump following the Capitol siege. This sparked heated debate about big tech's control over public discourse. Should private companies decide who gets a voice? But there's an even more troubling double standard at play. While Trump was banned for inflammatory tweets, other dangerous voices continue to freely spew hate. Take Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran. His Twitter account actively promotes extremism and threats against Israel, yet he faces no consequences, despite violating the same policies. The Chinese Communist Party is another prime example. They ruthlessly silence dissent at home while leveraging Western social media to spread propaganda globally. Why do our coastal elites not do anything about the CCP? Tech firms also turn a blind eye to extremists as long as engagement stays high. The pattern seems clear: selective enforcement and lack of accountability for those who further the platform's goals. These cases highlight the immense power of big tech to discreetly shape minds on a global scale, and without transparency and fair standards, they inadvertently aid the spread of destructive ideologies. This should concern anyone who values intellectual freedom and truth, but this problem extends far beyond just social media companies. A healthy information ecosystem requires vigilance across all fronts, from checking the power of partisan news to teaching critical thinking in schools, to calling out governments and corporations who hide the truth. The battle for freedom of thought has clearly entered a new digital era. The unchecked spread of flawed ideas now poses an even greater threat to the moral fabric of society. It's no longer just about the right to think freely, it's about the right to think critically, to carefully examine ideas rather than blindly absorb them. This capacity is urgently needed now to cut through the noise. The path forward begins with awareness, becoming conscious of the forces aiming to control our minds. But awareness alone is not enough. We must take action to create an information ecosystem that brings truth to light instead of distorting it. This is no easy undertaking. Powerful interests are invested in keeping us misinformed and divided, and many players in media and tech have misplaced incentives. Transforming this landscape will require a coordinated effort from conscientious citizens, platforms, and policymakers. We must demand integrity over engagement and consistency over bias. Only then can we hope to win back some semblance of freedom of thought. And this begs the question: how do we uplift knowledge over falsehood, compassion over tribal hatred? The path forward begins with nurturing the values so many sacrifice to secure: critical thinking, open inquiry, and diversity of ideas. And that's why Cicero was created, to be a digital platform upholding these ideals. I refuse to allow algorithms optimized for engagement to dominate intellectual discourse, because viral content is often polarizing misinformation, not wisdom, and that's why Cicero was created, to be a digital platform upholding these ideals. Cicero's aim is to make knowledge accessible while cultivating critical thinking. We actively elevate diversity of expertise and perspectives beyond filter bubbles. Users engage with a marketplace of ideas to draw their own conclusions. We cannot erase humanity's scarred inheritance of flawed ideologies, but by learning history's lessons, we equip ourselves to disrupt their transmission. Cicero endeavors to be one part of this, a catalyst for moral progress in the digital age. Think of Cicero as your oasis of knowledge and truth on the internet, a place you can dive deep into nuanced conversations about business, politics, science, and culture, where you engage with transparent data, not manipulated talking points, and where intellectual diversity and integrity take priority over chasing engagement. We accomplish this in a few key ways. First, we discover and curate a diverse range of experts and independent thinkers. These are thinkers focused on elevating discourse, not recapitulating tribal dogmas. Second, Cicero is designed to provide intellectual nourishment rather than quick dopamine hits. You dive into topics at length instead of scrolling endlessly through sensationalist headlines or social media feeds. Third, our algorithms promote intellectual diversity of perspectives, countering the echo chambers plaguing our discourse today. You are exposed to a spectrum of well-reasoned views to enrich your understanding, even if you disagree with some. Fourth, we cultivate a community focused on curiosity, constructive conversations, and the search for truth. You can discuss complex issues in depth with a spirit of openness, resisting knee-jerk reactions. In a sense, Cicero is working to create an oasis where reason is valued over hysteria, where nuance is embraced rather than shunned, and where the quest for truth brings out the best in humanity rather than the worst. Please join us at cicero.ly. If this video resonated with you, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Liking this video also helps promote it so others can find it too. And please consider sharing this video with friends and family to expand the conversation. Ideas multiply their power when we dare to spread them. By engaging, you become an active participant in nurturing wisdom and progress in our digital spaces. Don't underestimate the ripple effects we all create together.